Yes, guys, welcome back to the MMA Soccer Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Frazer Krohn, and it's going to be all about the UFC today because I'll be honest, I haven't watched the PFL or Bellator. Obviously, I know the results from the PFL and Bellator with the likes of Jason Jackson losing his title. I don't know why we've still got a Bellator title, but it is what it is. Paul Hughes obviously got the win in his promotional debut. Impa Kasanganay and Sabadou Sai got big wins. Rob Wilkinson obviously won as well. But for me, this weekend was all about the UFC in Saudi Arabia, especially because it was on a good time zone for us Brits. And then we've got to look ahead to UFC 303 this weekend. The UFC main 303 main card and the UFC 303 prelims are going to be broken down by yours truly. But as I said, we're going to look at UFC Saudi Arabia to kick off. Obviously, last week I spoke about the changes in the card from Khamzat Chimaev pulling out of the fight to Ikram Alikserov coming into the fight, and I thought that it was a very, very good um, late replacement fighter. I'll talk about that fight, the main event with Robert Whittaker in a second. Um, some of the it was a tough card to watch, especially the prelims. Four fights to start off. Four fights to kickstart the card, all going to a decision. Nicholas Dalby versus Fakhretdinov was a Rinyat. As a long time listener to the show will know, I can't pronounce any. I'm dreadful at pronouncing names, but that was a really good fight. I think Rinat was holding on to that fight in the final round. It was a split decision win for Rinat. I'm not too I'm not too mad about the decision. I would have liked Nicholas Dalby to have got the nod because I'm a big Nicholas Dalby fan. I think the way that he fights is he's a good asset to the welterweight division. I think he's Nicholas Dalby. Let me just double check. He was coming into this fight in really good form. Four wins on the bounce, um, one finish, which got him a fight of the night against Gabriel Bonfim last time out. It is what it is. Felipe Lima. I want to talk a little bit about Felipe Lima. Obviously, coming into this, I think he's the Octagon bantamweight champion. Let me just double check that he was the bantamweight champion because I'm pretty sure he was. But taking this fight on short notice after Narimov's opponent pulled out. Let me just double check. Narimov, 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 Narimov. Let me just check. I don't want to get this wrong because I'm about to give him all the plaudits in the world. If I give him all the plaudits and then I get it wrong, it's not a good look. Yeah, Octagon bantamweight champion, just as I predicted. This guy's coming to the fight, coming to the UFC at late notice, and I'll be honest, he probably put on the most impressive performance. Now, that comes at a caveat is he was losing the fight. He was losing the fight pretty convincingly until the final round when his coach got into his ear and said, blah, 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 you know, remember your mum. You take essentially he's saying, look, take a win home with you. He hasn't seen his mum in 2 years, I think they were saying on the broadcast, fighting out Brazil. But he's affiliated with All Stars in Sweden. And he was losing the fight to Mohamed Narimov, who, he knows how to navigate a fight. He, in my opinion, lost the fight against Nathaniel Wood. Felipe Lima came in to that final round, did what he needed to do, got the back, got the choke, and got a 50K bonus. Really good performance. He's taken. This is how you join the UFC. He takes the fight on short notice, up a weight class against a guy who's 3-0 in the UFC with two finishes, who himself took his debut up a weight class against Jamie Mullarkey. So we know that he's a big guy. Felipe Lima, I don't think he'd be massively undersized at lightweight. Narimov wasn't, clearly. And he comes in there and finishes him in the third round when he needed a finish to win the fight. Phenomenal stuff from Felipe Lima. And I think he's got a really high future in the sport. 13-1, 13 fight win streak, former Octagon bantamweight champion. The sky's the limit for Lima. I want to see him out again. I want to see him back down at bantamweight. Obviously, he took the fight on short notice, which is why it was up at featherweight. But I want to see him back down at bantamweight, and I want to see him out again before the end of the year. And I think he should be. he should be rewarded with a big name or a pay-per-view slot. I really think that that should be the case. Jared Gordon and Nasrat Haqparast. Nasrat Haqparast, I don't, you know, four fight win streak now. Do I ever think he's going to be a contender? I don't. I don't. Nasrat Haqparast is one of the. He's a frustrating fighter because I think that he's got a lot. I think he's got a lot in his locker, but he just never seems to be able to put it together when it gets to the very highest level. If you look at the wins that he's got, I mean, his last four wins have come against John McDessie, Landon Quinones, Jamie Mullarkey, and now Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon's probably one of the biggest names on his record, apart from, maybe Matt Jacasey. Aside from that, he got finished by Drew Dober. He lost to Dan Hooker, and he lost to Bobby Green. Jared Gordon, on the other hand, again, I rewatched his fight against Paddy Pimblett for reasons that will become obvious fairly soon on the channel. But I rewatched his fight against Paddy Pimblett. Lost that one. He had a no contest against Bobby Green due to a head clash, and then he knocked out Mark Masden, the Olympian. He then loses a split decision to Nasrat Haqparast, which is a really good fight. I think it was unlucky not to get fight of the night, but there were 4 performance bonuses given out instead. But, it is what it is. None of these guys will get cut from the UFC. None of these guys will ever be a champion in the UFC. These guys, I think, will stay as and I don't like to use it, but it is what it is. They're a gatekeeper to the top 15, both of these men. If you can't beat the likes of Jared Gordon and Nasrat Haqparast, you can't make the top 15 of the lightweight division. Moving on to the UFC Saudi Arabia main card. Now, main card did have a little bit of a shake-up. Shara Bullet Magomedov's opponent obviously dropped out late notice and was replaced. Ikram Alikserov, obviously, like I say, either late notice replacement. So it's not quite the main card that we expected, but it was the main card that we got. And the main card delivered in a big way. Two decisions, 3 finishes. Can't really argue with it. Volkan Oezdemir took 2 minutes and 38 seconds to knock Johnny Walker out. I think he probably only took about 2 minutes of 10 seconds to knock Johnny Walker out. I think Johnny Walker was essentially knocked out for a lot of that final kind of sequence of Volkan Oezdemir. But Volkan Oezdemir does what kind of got him to the dance, as it were. Let's not forget that this guy joined the UFC. He got a split decision victory over OSP, and then he got 2 very quick finishes: a finish in 28 seconds over Misha Serkinov, a finish in 42 seconds over Jimmy Manuwa. That got him a title shot, and that was when these guys, Serkinov and especially Jimmy Manuwa, Jimmy was on the very brink of a title shot. If you remember, he faced off with Daniel Cormier through the fence. He just knocked out Ovin St. Preux in the second round. He knocked out Corey Anderson in the main event in London. And this fight was against Volkan Oezdemir. It was open. I think it was opening up the main card of the Jones versus Cormier 2 fight. So that's how close he was potentially to a title shot. And obviously, as we know, the next title shot went to Oezdemir, and he got exposed in that one. And then he fought Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes, both of those in losses. Bounced back against Ilir Latifi and Alexander Rakic. Then he ran into Jiri Prochazka and Magomed Ankalaev. Then he won that weird fight against Paul Craig, where Paul Craig kept on trying to pull guard. Then he lost to Nikita Krylov. But now he's bounced back with two victories. Bogdan Guskov, I think that was a late notice fight for Guskov, took it on late notice, but it is what it is. Now he's bounced back against Johnny Walker, and he did so in relatively, brutal fashion. He not only knocked out Johnny Walker, but he absolutely separated Johnny Walker from consciousness. And Johnny Walker's got to change something now. Let me just look down the rankings. So Johnny Walker was fighting number 7. It was number 7. Volkan Oezdemir number 9. We'll assume that they'll just swap places. Makes a lot of sense to me. But as far as Volkan Oezdemir is concerned, he's 34 years old now. We know that he can headline cards, especially with his power and his highlight reel. Like I said, 34 for a light heavyweight isn't the oldest in the world. The last thing to go is your power, and he's got plenty of it. But I mean, next, does he take on someone like a Khalil Roundtree, or does he look for a rematch with an Alexander Rakic, who obviously is coming off a loss, or does he look to get that one back against Nikita Krylov? Doesn't Nikita Krylov's in a strange place in the division at the moment himself. You know, he wins a couple, loses a couple, wins a couple, loses a couple. Um, but yeah, Johnny Walker, I don't get it. He obviously, as we know, he moved around. He started his career moving around a lot. Brazil, the US, England. Now he seems to have kind of settled a little bit in SBG, but it hasn't really worked for me. He obviously got the win over Arn Kutalaba. He got the win over Paul Craig, which I think if they ran it back, Paul Craig would have a very good opportunity to beat him. He got the win over Anthony Smith. Then he got the no contest with Magomed Ankalaev. He then got finished by Ankalaev, and now he's been finished by Volkan Oezdemir. Johnny Walker if he needs to work on his stand up. He will stay at SBG because I think from what I understand, he's married to an Irish girl and blah 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 blah. But he's never going to break in. I think at the end of that after that Anthony Smith fight when he was scheduled against Magomed Ankalaev, people were talking about him as a potential title contender. I am glad that he never fought Alex Pereira because that would have not been good for Johnny Walker at all. But something needs to change for Johnny Walker. But it's nice to see Volkan Oezdemir, pick up back-to-back wins, back-to-back finishes. He's still got something to offer in the division, but he's fought who's who in the division, so it might be difficult for him. Moving on to Shara Magomedov versus Antonio Trocoli. This is a difficult one for me. For this one, I'm gonna pull up the stats because it was interesting. It was a very interesting fight. Trocoli had 3 minutes worth of action in his gas tank. Why was that? Because he flew halfway across the world, 18-hour flight, 2 stop-offs, I think, on a week's notice to take a fight against Shara Magomedov, possibly. Is it because he is the wrong side of 30, from what I understand, Trocoli? Yeah, wrong side of 30, 33 years old. Maybe. Is it because he hasn't competed in MMA since 2021? Maybe. Or is it just because that he wasn't prepared for it, that he has a poor gas tank? Maybe. I don't know why Tricoli seemed to be absolutely out on his feet, dead by the start of round two. But he was. He landed none of 7 takedowns despite the blatant fence grab by Shara Magomedov. It was, he didn't land a single takedown as per the UFC stats. But the finish from Shara Magomedov was good. The issue for me was that he had what can only be described as a wounded animal in front of him. He's a guy that was very, very tired. And in that third round, especially, he was essentially a punch bag for Shower Bullet. And yes, he did drop him. There's no denying that. Anyone that's seen the finish has seen the finish. But it would really interest me to see Shower Bullet against someone with a hope of actually winning the fight. Like I said, Tricoli came in there and I think he had 3 minutes of cardio in him for what is potentially a 15-minute fight. He didn't land a single punch in that final round. It was a sitting duck in there for Shower Bullet, who could just, with the adrenaline of potentially getting a UFC finish, which he did, and he got a bonus for it. That adrenaline for Shower Bullet just, obviously coursed through his veins and led to the third round stoppage. I was disappointed in Tricoli. I don't think it's probably his fault. I was a little bit disappointed in Shara Magomedov. This guy's joined the UFC with a massive hype. We heard this week that he's going to be featuring in a film. Dana White said that unfortunately, due to, let's be honest, a questionable past, he's unlikely to be able to fight in the US. So that he's going to have to fight in abroad essentially, probably in the Middle East, whether it be UAE, whether it be Saudi Arabia going forwards, I'm not sure. Just looking down his record now, it's not like he's got a padded record either. His debut was against a guy who was 13-7, a little bit padded, 0-1, 0-0. But then you move up and he's got pretty decent wins. 16-4, 21-5. I mean, 7-6 is 8-second win before joining the UFC. But then, like I say, he's now beaten Bruno Silva. Now he's beaten Antonio Trocoli. 13-0. I still don't know if he's great. There's absolutely zero chance. Bo Nickal's very smart because Bo Nickal's called him out, and there's absolutely no chance that the UFC, Dana White, Hunter, and the guys make Bo Nickel versus Shara Bullet. No chance. And the reason for that is because, like I said, Magomedov won't be fighting in the US. They won't have Bo Nickel fighting anywhere but the US. So you do the math. That never happens. Gastelum versus Rodriguez. I'm sick of Kelvin Gastelum. I'll read out the tweet that I made earlier on in the week when I heard that he wasn't making weight. So let me just confirm. Antonio Trocoli and Ikram Alikserov both made weight despite being in the US this time last week, taking their fights on short notice. But Kelvin Gastelum, a man who's had this book has had his fight booked for this card for 13 weeks. So that's since March, April time. Couldn't make weight and had to shift the fight, not only to a catch weight, but to a whole different division, 15 pounds heavier. It's an absolute joke. It's incompetent, it's lazy, and it's unprofessional. He's now this at the time of writing, he was 2-6, but he's 3-6 in his last 9 fights. For me, regardless of how the fight went, he shouldn't have been eligible for bonus. Luckily, he didn't get one. And personally, I'd give him one last chance at welterweight, if not cut him. He offers nothing to the what division, what does this benefit this fight? Yes, he won and he got back in the win column, but at middleweight. But he's on paper, he's a welterweight. At the end of the day, I think he's lazy. I think he's unprofessional. I think he's incompetent. And if I'm Dana White, who it appears he's pretty pissed, Dana White is pretty pissed off. But if I'm Dana White, I say, Kelvin, you've got one last chance. One last chance. Your next fight will be at welterweight. If you don't make welterweight, if you make 172 pounds, if you make 171.5 pounds, regardless of the result, you could get knockout of the night. You get the fastest knockout in UFC history. You're out of the company because it's getting a joke now. I think it's the 3rd or 4th time that Kelvin Gastelum's missed weight. And like I said, Gastelum at this point, what does he offer to a division? We don't know what division he's in. He's gone between welterweight and lightweight. Welterweight. Gosh, can you imagine being a lightweight? Welterweight and middleweight for the majority of his career. He's been fighting at middleweight for a long amount of time. Beat Chris Curtis, dropped down in weight to welterweight, dominated by Sean Brady. Supposed to be fighting Daniel Rodriguez, and then during fight week, he informed Daniel Rodriguez that he's not going to make even 175. 175 could have been the fight. If you're struggling with your weight cut, you make a catch weight at 175, 178. Meet them halfway. 178. No, I can't do that. Can't do 180. Can't do 182. It's going to have to be a middleweight fight at 185. It's an absolute joke. It's unprofessional, and it pissed me off more than it probably should have. But for Daniel Rodriguez, he's a guy that's gone through a camp. He's done the hard yards. He's got up at 6 a.m. to do his runs to get the weight off. He's fought smaller, lighter guys in the gym. He's prepared for a welterweight fight. You tell Daniel Rodriguez 10 weeks ago, 1 month ago, that he's going to be in a middleweight fight because you're struggling to make weight because you're too lazy to make weight. He changes his camp up. He maybe doesn't have, he doesn't have to concentrate so much on the weight. He can do an extra sparring session. He can do an extra pad session. He can do an extra strength session. And now Daniel Rodriguez has lost 3 on the bounce now. Neil Magny, Ian Gary, and now Kelvin Gastelum. If I'm Daniel Rodriguez, I would have said, look, I'll take the fight against Kelvin Gastelum at middleweight because I haven't flown all the way to Saudi Arabia for nothing. But win or lose, I want an easy, favourable matchup next. I don't want to be cut from the UFC because I'm saving this fight. And I hope that Dana White sort of, recognises that because for me, Daniel Rodriguez, he doesn't deserve to be cut after this. Yes, he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but he's done something that he shouldn't have had to do. He shouldn't have had to be forced into taking that fight, and he was pretty much forced into taking that fight. Yeah, he can have 20% of Gastelum's purse, but I was listening to the Fight Disciples podcast this morning, or this afternoon, sorry, and they said in that situation, start Kelvin Gastelum with a 1 point deduction in the fight. Start him with a 1 point deduction in the fight. That way, the fight would have been, it would have been a majority decision rather than a unanimous decision. It would have been 28-28, 29-27, and 29-27. He should have got a point deducted because he cheated in the fight. He went in there at a weight that he's comfortable at, that he knows he's been at in the past, that he knows he can take a shot at against Daniel Rodriguez, who wasn't preparing for a fight. Kelvin Gastelum will have known, I'd say 3 weeks ago, whether he was going to make weight. At a push, a fortnight ago. So why not call the UFC, get your guys to speak to their guys, get their guys to speak to Daniel Rodriguez's guys and say, look, I'm not going to make weight. Can we change it to a 175 catch weight? Can we change it to a 178 catch weight? Can we change it to a 180 catch weight? I'll still give you a percentage of my purse. No. During fight week, I'm not going to make welterweight. It'll have to be 185. Absolute joke of it. Joke. And to be honest, I'm gutted that he won because behavior like that doesn't sit well with me at all. Neither does behavior like having a tantrum after you've just been absolutely dominated by your fellow countrymen, which is what we saw with Sergey Pavlovich. I'm not going to go into the fight in any great detail because it's quite a boring, hard watch. But if you're Alexander Volkov standing at what, 6'7", 6'8", yeah, 6'7", and you're facing a guy in Sergey Pavlovich who is, 6'3", so you're considerably taller than him. You've got a longer reach, and you know that he's got insane power. You keep him as far away as possible, and that's exactly what Volkov did with that front kick to the body, that jab to the face. You saw Sergey Pavlovich's nose was absolutely battered. He just did what he had to do to navigate the fight, and then had a tantrum after it. Is what it is. I'm not going to talk too much about the heavyweight division because I think it's ticking away nicely, shall we say. But how good is Tom Aspinall? He dominated both of these guys, and these guys are pretty much now, you've got Jones at the top, Aspinall, obviously interim champion. He's facing Curtis Blades. Alexander Volkov will take over. I think on Monday it'll go Jones, Aspinall, Garn, Volkov. Blades will go up a place, then Volkov, because it looks better if Curtis Blades, you've got the interim champion versus the number 3 guy. It's all a marketing ploy. But Sergey Pavlovich has got to go back to the drawing board. If he faces someone like Jason Almeida next, that's an interesting fight for me. Volkov, I think I want him to see him rematch Garn. If not, he maybe fights the loser of the interim title bout, either Blades or Aspinall in a rematch, but we'll see. Moving on to the main event, because I've spoken a lot more about all the other fights on the card more than I wanted to. But moving on to the main event, Robert Whittaker absolutely batters, absolutely dominates, shows that there are levels to this game, and he just absolutely runs through Ikram Alikserov like a hot knife through butter. He was phenomenal. And I'm not having any of this fraud check and all this, because a fraud check is when we had a little, when you got, I've seen a lot online, fraud check Aliskerov. Oh, look at Aliskerov, absolutely had no business being in there with Robert Whittaker. If this fight was booked months in advance and Robert Whittaker was an unranked guy, I understand. But Robert Whittaker has got a good shout to be the best middleweight on the planet. So everyone giving Aliskerov fraud check and shit like that, absolute jokers. You don't know MMA, quite simply put. You don't know MMA. I don't think it's even that Aliskerov was particularly bad. It was that Robert Whittaker was absolutely elite. We know that Robert Whittaker makes some of the best reads in the world of MMA, not just the UFC. In the world of combat sports, especially the stand-up game, he makes some of the best reads and adapts to those reads that we've ever seen. Robert Whittaker saw when he threw certain shots that Alekseyev, I think it was the jab that he was throwing, that Alekseyev would react by bringing his leg up either to try and land a knee on Robert Whittaker or to try and throw a reactionary kick. He did that 3 times. And on that final, Whittaker threw it and said, right, okay, that's what you're doing. I'll feint again. And okay, okay, that's what you're doing again. So now I'm going to feint. And as you do that, I'm going to throw my big overhand. Landed on Ikram Alikserov, wobbled him, pretty much had him on, easy street, straight from the off. Then Whittaker lands that beautiful uppercut on the along the fence, ground and pound finish. First finish since 2017 for Whittaker. And if I think I was quite reactionary on my Twitter last night, I said, get this man a title shot. Took the fight against Khamzat, a fight that nobody wants to take. Then took the short notice fight against Ikram Alikserov. Get that man in Perth and get him a title shot next. I was reactionary. I was reactionary. I'll speak about what I want for him next. I've just read Ikram Alikserov. He put no excuses. I don't regret anything. It was a big experience against one of the best in the sport. Exactly. I'm young. I'll work on my mistakes, learn, and get back to business soon. Thank you, everyone, for your support messages. Class from Ikram Alikserov. And I think, he can recognize he was outclassed on the day by, like I said, arguably the best middleweight on the planet. For me, Robert Whittaker's next fight should be a #1 contender shot. If obviously last week we had the official announcement of Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya at UFC 305 in Perth in August, I think that is. Let me just double check. Yeah, August 17th. That's the only fight on the card at the moment. Middleweight main event, 5 rounds. How about a middleweight co-main event, 5 rounds? Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker. They're the 2 people in the middleweight division that haven't faced each other yet. If you look at the middleweight rankings, you've got Dricus, the champion, as face #1, Sean Strickland, beaten him. He's going to face #2, Israel Adesanya, and as face #3, Robert Whittaker, beaten him. Sean Strickland, face #1 and face #2. Robert Whittaker, face #2 and face the champion. There is one logical move because who else are you going to give Robert Whittaker? Nassourdine Imanov batters him, absolutely runs through him, probably dominates him over 5 rounds. Marvin Vettori, he'd already battered him. Jared Cannonier, he's already battered him. Robert Whittaker versus Sean Strickland in Perth is the fight to make, and that's the main talking point for me coming out of this this UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia. Moving on to talk UFC 303. This was the return of Conor McGregor, who broke his toe and was unable to make the walk. Like I said, I'm not mad. Like I said last week, I'll link the podcast down below. If you want to go and hear my thoughts on Conor McGregor pulling out the fight. I'm not mad about it, to be honest, because I want Conor for what is, let's be honest, it's probably Conor's last fight. It really is. Win or lose, I think it'll be his last fight. I want him at 100%. I don't want him at 50% with an injury. And I don't think that's fair to fans after, we haven't seen him in so long. And I don't think that's fair to his opponent or to Conor himself. I'm not mad about him pulling out of the fight. But what's not a good look for him is that Alex Pereira is taking this fight after having 2 broken toes. Conor McGregor broke his toe and pulled out of the fight. Not a great look. But the main event, Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka, who I was going to do a watch along for the first fight between these two, but I've just run out of time, to be honest. I wanted to get this podcast up and ready before fight week. So unfortunately that won't be happening. However, you look at the first fight and I think you see a pretty clear keys to victory for one man, and that is Jiri Prochazka. You take Alex Pereira down, you're a little bit more cautious in how you enter the range of Alex Pereira, because that's what happened last time. He wasn't cautious. He entered the range of Alex Pereira and he was knocked out in that second round for Pereira to capture the belt. I think what you have to do if you're Alex Pereira is pretty much what you did in that first fight. He did manage to defend a few takedowns of Jiri Prochazka's. you have got to be aware of the gas tank of both men, not just Yuri Pashka, but of Alex Pereira. And if you're Alex Pereira, I think you've got to be calm and you've got to be patient in this one because Alex Pereira, who am I to tell Alex Pereira anything about striking, by the way? But this is just my sort of layman's views on the fight. You've got to take it easy because I think that Alex Pereira is gonna land pretty consistently on Jiří Prochazka. In that first fight, he threw 72 strikes, landed 49 total strikes, of which 38 were significant. That fight went on for 9 minutes. A lot of them, granted, let me just have a look, were probably, he does set up a lot with the legs. Yep, 6 of 7 with the legs in round two, 6 of 8 with the legs in. So yeah, 15 of those strikes were leg strikes, 8 to the body, obviously 38 to the head. Like I said, I think that Alex Pereira will land on Jiří Prochazka with ease and fairly regularly, as we saw with Alexander Rakic in at UFC 300. He landed heavy and often on Jiří Prochazka, but wasn't able to put him away. Alex Pereira has different power than Alexander Rakic. That's not to say that he's going to be able to do Jiří Prochazka in one punch, because although he did it before, no two fights are ever the same. Jiří Prochazka, I think, will mix the martial arts in this one. He will come out with his crazy stand-up style. It may still take a round or two for Alex Pereira to get back used to that. I know he's been in there for 9 minutes with him before, and it was only last year. With that being said, it's still a very strange style. You can't get a sparring partner in, especially not on 3 weeks' notice or 2 weeks' notice or whatever it is, to mimic Jiří Prochazka. I think he'll struggle, not struggle, but he may take his time to get used to the unorthodox, crazy style of Jiří Prochazka. I think both men should work the legs. If you work the legs of Alex Pereira, it does potentially bring a counter hook into the equation, so you've got to be careful when you're working the legs, but it will stop his forward momentum lightly. Likewise with Alex Pereira, if he works the legs of Jiří Prochazka, it'll slow down that movement. We've seen it happen before. If he does choose to try and wrestle for the majority of the fight against Alex Pereira, it will prevent him from being able to wrestle as effectively because he won't have any power in his legs to drive through. But we'll see. I cannot wait to break this fight down next week already. What a phenomenal fight it is. But it does come with a caveat of it was on short notice. So are these guys just going to go out there and sprint, or are these guys going to take it easy? We'll have to wait and see. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez in the co-main event, 3 rounds at featherweight. Late notice fight again. I think 3 weeks notice. Again, a late notice fight for both guys. This one's really interesting. Brian Ortega's coming off one of the more impressive wins of his career against Yair Rodriguez last time out. Diego Lopez, likewise, coming off the best win of his career, first round knockout of Sadiq Youssef at UFC 300. Very interesting. I'm very interested in this fight because I've got no idea how it's going to go. The ironic thing is for Diego Lopez is that he's never landed or shot in for a takedown in his career yet. He has a triangle armbar finish of Gavin Tucker where neither man landed a single strike. Shows you how good he can be on the ground with his takedown defense. He didn't need that against Pat Sabatini. He didn't need that against Sadiq Youssef, but he was taken down 4 times against Movsar Evloev. He did take the fight on short notice, but he was pretty much dominated in that fight. For me, Brian Ortega is not a very good wrestler at all. He showed a lot better wrestling in his last fight against Yair Rodriguez, but he's not a very good wrestler. He's in the same ilk for me as Mackenzie Dern, someone with elite jiu-jitsu when they get on the ground, but doesn't always have the best takedowns themselves to get the fight to the ground. So they're a good reactionary jiu-jitsu practitioner, especially for Brian Ortega when guys, do either knock him down or take him down even, or he gets into a position where he can jump for the guillotine. He can, as we saw against Alexander Volkanovski, or he can jump for the, triangles or the arm bars. He's very, very good, as we know. I mean, four post-fight bonuses in a row kind of speaks for itself. He's the king of a late submission as well, so throughout the entire fight. Diego Lopez will have to command his P's and Q's. But for me, the more the story is this, and I don't like to compare fighters an awful lot as far as where they are in their careers, but this for me is Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis 2. Benoit Saint-Denis, the up and coming guy, the guy that puts on fun fights, finishes fights, is very promising. People are talking about him in a potential title shot. Brian Ortega has been there. He's got the title shot a couple of times. He's come up short a couple of times. Very similar career to Dustin Poirier. He's almost won the title on a number of occasions, especially against Volkanovski. He was nowhere near against Max Holloway. It's dominant performance by Holloway in that one. But he's the nearly man at featherweight. Nearly got a title shot. The UFC keep on pushing him. He nearly got a title shot. Push him again. He nearly won the title. Push him again. He nearly wins the title. But he does kind of tend to get battered in title fights as much as you don't want to hear it. He obviously got that injury again. He's 16-3. The thing is that the third loss came as a result of an injury to Yair Rodriguez, and then he returned after that injury and dominated Yair Rodriguez. It's a very interesting fight. It will show either a changing of the guard or that Diego Lopez has some way to go. And I'm really excited. I hope Diego Lopez just puts in a good performance, as do I hope that Brian Ortega does, because Brian Ortega, all the pressure's on Brian Ortega in this one. He's the third, I think, ranked guy, maybe fourth. Let me just double check the rankings. Brian Ortega is the third ranked guy in the division. Diego Lopez is the 11th, I think. No, 14th. So all the pressure is on Brian Ortega. Diego Lopez isn't meant to win this one. Brian Ortega is. Heaps of pressure on the American. One of the strangest fights on the main card is Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Oh, wait, no, it's not. It's Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg. Oh, wait, no, it's not. It's Carlos Ulberg versus Anthony Smith. Oh, wait, no, it's not. It's now Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze at 205. What's gone on with this? I mean, I don't want to talk too much about this fight because I don't really care about it. It's two guys that I don't think are very good. Anthony Smith, obviously coming off that win last time out against Victor Petrino. Petrino, I don't know what he was doing, putting his head in where he put his head in, as it were, and was choked out by Anthony Smith in that first round. Big upset. So fair play to Anthony Smith. Took the fight against Carlos Ulberg on short notice. Now he's facing Roman Dolidze, who's a very different fighter to Carlos Ulberg because he can mix in takedowns, whereas Ulberg will not look to shoot for a takedown. He's got a takedown defense of 33%, which isn't great. However, we've seen him get big wins. Kyle Daukaus, Phil Halls, Jack Hermanson, 3 back-to-back wins, all of them earning him a performance of the night bonus. But then we saw him outworked by Marvin Vettori. We saw him pretty badly dominated by Nassourdine Imanov in their fight night main event. I don't know. He landed 34 significant strikes across 5 rounds. I don't know how Ron McCarthy scored it a draw. It is what it is. This fight I'm not particularly buzzing for, should we say. A fight that I think is going under the radar is Macy Chiasson versus Mario Bueno Silva. Let's not forget Mario Bueno Silva just coming off the loss to Raquel Pennington last time out. Macy Chiasson coming off a bounce back win. Obviously, she got knocked out with that up kick to the liver by Aldana. Then she returned last time out to, I think, finish Pani Kianzad. Pani Kianzad in the first round. That was in March. So she's staying very active. Has Mayo Bueno Silva sorted out the cardio issues that she showed in the Raquel Pennington fight? This is only a 3-round fight, so we shall see. A fight that I thought may change location. It hasn't. It's a big test for both men. It's a very interesting fight. Ian Machado Gary versus Michael Venom Page. I'm fascinated by this fight. Ian Gary, undefeated, 14-0, has only really fought sort of 2 or 3 guys of note. Jeff Neal last time out, decision. Neil Magny before that, decision. And then he knocked out Daniel Rodriguez with a head kick. He has to work out the puzzle that is Michael Venom Page. Michael Venom Page joined the UFC too late, as we all know, but is 1-0 in the UFC, having, I'd say dominated Kevin Holland in his debut. The winner of this one has a pretty decent shout at getting in and around the top 5 next, because both men are, European from this side of the UK. Obviously, Gary is from Ireland. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. A fly decided to join the podcast. I'm not a flyweight. This is at welterweight. Anyway, yeah, Ian Gary is from Ireland. Michael Venom Page from London. The welterweight champion of the world, as it stands, obviously ahead of UFC 304, is Leon Edwards from the UK as well. There's a narrative there the UFC will probably like to sell. Big test for both men. At the moment, I don't know who I'm going for in that fight. I think Ian Gary. But if you look at the 2 guys that Michael Page has lost to, that crazy knockout against Douglas Lima, and then he was out wrestled by Logan Storley. He's never really been outstruck. Ian Machado Gary, let me just see how many takedowns he shot for in his UFC career, because I cannot imagine that it's many. I mean, he averages 0.55 takedowns per 15 minutes. He landed 2 of 2 against Neil Magny, a man who's quite easy to take down. So that one's a really interesting fight, I think, to open up the main card. On the prelims, I don't want to talk too much about the prelims because they're not great. There's a lot of recognizable names, which is good. Joe Pfeiffer returns after his fraud check. It's not a fraud check. He just got beaten by Jack Manson last time out in a main event. He returns against Marc-Andre Barrio. Great scrap at featherweight between 2 veterans of the game, Andre Feely and Cub Swanson. Charles Jourdain takes on Jean Silva. If I could recommend watching anyone on the prelims, it would be Peyton Talbot. He was phenomenal in his debut. Knocked out Cameron Simon in the 12 seconds into the second round. It wasn't his debut, it was his second fight in the UFC, having got a place in the Contender Series. Bantamweight, he's 8-0, 7 finishes, various different ways. Peyton Talbot is one to watch without a doubt. Michelle Waterson Gomez, looking to snap a 4-fight win streak and a run of decision, a run that has seen her go 1-6 in her last 7. I don't think she's going to do it. She faces Gillian Robertson. I've been high on Gillian Robertson for a number of years. She's got the best jiu-jitsu, arguably some of the best jiu-jitsu in the division without a doubt. We've still got Michelle Waterson Gomez, I believe, ranked. Yep, she's still ranked despite not winning a fight since, let me just double check because I want this to be highlighted, 2020. She hasn't put a run of wins together since 2018, 2019. She's still ranked in the division. So it is what it is. But yeah, Gillian Robertson runs through her like a dose of salt. Andrei Arlovski still doing the damn thing. He comes in there against Martin Buday. Carlos Hernandez versus Ray Tsaria. Tsaria is undefeated at 9-0. I think he's making his debut. Yeah, he won the road to the UFC in February. He takes on Carlos Hernandez, who has only lost twice. He's lost twice in his UFC career. It's not too much to ride home about. And Ricky Simone returns for the first time in what seems like quite a while. I don't think we've seen Simone in. Well, we saw Simone in January, and he was pretty badly beaten, convincingly beaten, I should say, by Mario Batistuta. Then before that, he lost to Song Yadong by knockout in the 5th round of their main event. He returned against Vinicius Oliveira, who, if you remember, has scored what I still think is the knockout of the year so far. In his debut against Sopaj, the flying knee from across. Well, he'd hurt his opponent, and then he landed one of the most brutal flying knees we will see. That's UFC 303 in a nutshell. Tiny bit of news that I really want to touch on because it's really vital to the world of combat sports. You know, it's being promoted yesterday. Paige Van Zandt to power slap. My God, she is desperate. It's embarrassing, in my opinion. UFC main evented a UFC card against Rose Namajunas, beaten. It is what it is. AEW after leaving the UFC, then BKFC. She does OnlyFans. She fought on Misfits, and now she's in Power Slap. How desperate can you be for a bit of change? It is what it is. I don't care about it. I don't think the UFC. I mean, it's embarrassing. Paige Van Zandt at this point is embarrassing, but it is what it is. Bobby Knuckles reigns again supreme in the middleweight division. Probably, like I say, on his day, the best middleweight in the division. Alikserov just came up against, like I say, one of the best middleweights in the world. UFC 303 is scheduled to slap this weekend. Not power slap, just slap. It's a replacement for Conor McGregor. It's supposed to be Conor McGregor fight week. Instead, we've got yet another Alex Pereira fight week. The guy's a gangster. Enjoy the fights, and I'll catch you next time.